My name is Kate Riley. And I'm a survivor, not a victim. All right, so before we begin, I urge you to grab a piece of paper and a pen. I ask that you all jot down 3 traits that you believe an individual with an abusive personality would carry. These can be as descriptive or as broad as you would like. It seems so simple, I know. Yet I was never tasked to do this at a younger age, and looking back, I should have been able to identify these common warning signs while in my extremely abusive and toxic relationship. Before our relationship became extremely controlling and abusive, there were what I would refer to as yellow flags. But the longer I got sucked in, the redder the flags became. I ask you that as you jot down these, you all remember them as you progress through your life and reflect on them if ever presented with the challenge of either identifying that you yourself is in an abusive relationship or potentially having to identify that a friend or a loved one is in a cycle of abuse with a partner and or a family member. I want to note that abuse happens in all shapes and sizes. It can be verbal, physical, emotional, or mental, and sometimes all of these things. Your examples could range from gaslighting to untreated mental illness, and far, far more. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Kate Riley, and I am a survivor, not a victim. I was young and naive when I met him, my abuser. I was in the military. It was my life dream. Unfortunately, I was injured and sustained femoral fractures in both of my femurs and was sent home on a constant valent leave. I think this is where my rebellion came in. It is also when I met him. Prior to the military, I was an ideal student. I was a corps commander of the JROTC program, a 4.0 student, and I literally lived my life in fear of disappointing my family in any shape or form. I conformed to all the standards and expectations that I thought had existed, and this was fine. Except I think my overwhelming want to please people finally broke me when my dreams of the military crashed down around me. Within a few days of coming home from my injury, I started what I would call my rebellion phase. I started indulging in piercings and tattoos and anything that made me feel non-conforming. He happened to be a tattoo artist, and as you can imagine, that is where this all started. At first, he swooned me. He made me feel beautiful and loved in so many ways. And in the beginning, every day felt like a fairy tale romance. I couldn't believe someone like him would love such a plain and nerdy girl like me. I was so blind to the yellow flags. He was somewhat controlling, self-centered, and narcissistic. He had his real name and he had his alter ego that he went by, but I wrote it off as it's his artist name. The swooning, it sucked me in, and before I knew it, we were getting a place together. This is when the yellow flags began to turn red. Immediately, he started to sleep with a loaded gun pointed to my head overnight, a Beretta. I'll never forget it. He quickly began to isolate me from my friends and family. He practiced a dark, almost voodoo-like religion in which he would give blood to his altar and wish harm upon my friends and family. I know. I should have packed my bags and ran the minute I found it. But the verbal threats he would make to me were too gruesome to even attempt to leave. I fell back into this routine I knew best, people pleaser. I figured if I kept him happy, he would never physically hurt me. Let's face it, anytime he would emotionally or verbally abuse me, he would apologize with roses or a sweet note. He didn't mean those hurtful things, right? He loved me and I loved him. And I was just so caught up in lust and fear, it was easier to ignore it. Over time, things got worse. Our roommate didn't want to live with us, so we found another place. He would cheat on me, leave me, and then show up unannounced, and I'd let him back for fear that he would hurt me or those that I care about. I won't get far into the details in regards to the verbal threats, because some of them are entirely too inappropriate. But he would threaten to tie me down, cut vulgar words into my body and then murder whoever I was with and then himself, so that not only would I be left emotionally scarred, but also physically scarred as well. This is just one of the many. As I stated earlier, I slept with a gun to my head most nights. He would make threats about hurting me or others if I left him, so I stayed. I stayed until he pawned his gun. I stayed until I seen an opportunity to say no more, I'm done. The day I put my foot down and said I was done was the day he did something unforgiving, the one thing he couldn't take back. He had left me yet again, and I knew he had pawned his gun, but would get it back the minute that he made enough money to. This was my chance, my only opportunity to stand up for what I deserved in my life. He kept begging to come over, so I invited for him to stay the night, as I did not get off until 11 p.m. Said I would cook lunch for the next day for us. He proceeded to come to my house the evening before my attack, and throughout the evening he was saying some pretty off-the-wall things. You know, nothing's gonna matter after tomorrow. Something big's gonna happen tomorrow. Katie, I'm gonna make everything right. I was very thrown off by it, but I didn't think much of it. It wasn't abnormal of him. And so we went to bed, and we had woke up the next day, and he was drawing a picture on a Burger King coupon. And I had asked him, do you want a piece of paper? He said, yes, I want to draw you a picture. And I said, okay. So I gave him a piece of paper. He proceeded to write a note that said, I love you more than life itself, Katie. He hid it, and I didn't know about this note. He also asked to take a picture with me. I didn't know he had posted the picture, but he had posted the picture and labeled it as the last kiss on social media. From there, he decided that he was gonna go for a walk. And I also had a friend over because I knew I was gonna tell him he wasn't welcome back in my home that day. So he goes for his walk, and we're talking, me and my friend, and we both, it clicks. We're like, oh, maybe he's gonna try to kill himself. I think he's gonna try to kill himself. And so we're like, we gotta go look for him. We have to go look for him. And so we get dressed. We proceed to go try to find him. As we're getting ready to walk out the door, he knocks, and she lets him in. And I just remember this really, really evil smile on his face before he walked through my door. And he comes in, my friend goes into the living room, which is around the corner, and I go back to cooking lunch. And I was getting ready to make mashed potatoes. So I was opening them, and the box had cut my finger, and he pushed me into the corner. And I thought, oh, he's gonna say, I'm so sorry, like you hurt yourself. And he touched my face and he said, Katie, if there's vengeance in your heart. And I said, there's not vengeance in my heart. I just can't keep doing this. You know, you have to treat me how I deserve to be treated, and until you can be the man I need you to be, we're not getting back together. And he said, no, Katie, and proceeds to start stabbing me in my throat. And so it all clicks. And as he's stabbing me, he says, if there's vengeance in your heart, you better dig 2 graves. And as he's stabbing me, I just remember being backed into a corner. There was my stove, a counter, and a sink. And he had me backed in the corner. And so I pulled my hand up and I shoved my hand on his shoulder and I pushed myself out of the corner. And as I was falling back, he grabs me and stabs me in the stomach. I remember my head just hitting the floor, and I remember looking up, and he proceeds to kneel over me and take 1 blow to himself. I went to yell for help, and all the air went out the side of my throat. He had gone all the way through my trachea. He had missed my jugular by millimeters. So as I try to yell for help, all of my air just escapes the side of my throat. And my friend at the time had heard me struggling, and so she had come in and he had gotten off of me, and she picked me up and we ran to the neighbor's house and called 911. I was life flighted to Iowa City and put on life support. I was intubated. I had multiple life-saving surgeries, so I fought really hard to be here. So on January 6th of 2013, I was brutally attacked by my partner, and as I mentioned, he stabbed me multiple times in my throat and stomach, and I endured multiple defensive wounds to my left hand while trying to block his life-threatening blows to my throat. Unfortunately, leading up to this attack, there were several red flags. Many people had warned me that our relationship was unhealthy, but I thought, never me. He would never hurt me that bad. The impacts it had on not just me, but also my family are unspeakable. My little brothers live in fear. Myself, my mother, and my stepmother all suffer from severe to moderate PTSD and other forms of anxiety and depression. My relationship with my relatives, who I'm used to be close with, are now diminished and barely par for the course. However, I have learned a great deal from this situation. I've learned to set boundaries, and I've learned my worth, and some days are hard, but most days I'm very thankful that I survived my attack and that I'm here to share my story. And I hope these words resonate with you, and I hope you all take something from it, and I hope that my words can save at least one person. Had I known then what I know now, I would have left sooner. I wouldn't have stayed in this constant cycle of abuse. He had so many common traits of an abusive partner. Me, who was young, dumb, and in love, I ignored them all. I ignored the Jekyll and Hyde personality swings. I ignored his possessive and jealous tendencies, his extremist ideologies, his constant need for reassurance, the drug and alcohol abuse, and his all-around manipulative and narcissistic ways. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I was a prime beholder of victim traits. I had lower self-esteem from my younger years, history of family conflict, an excessively giving nature, the inability to say no, and the belief that if I loved him harder, he would change, and the irrational defensive mode in which I would justify his behavior with his childhood past or whatever other excuse I could think of for him. It's not right. I also had a rough childhood, and what he did to me, his childhood is no excuse for, but at the time, I would justify it and I would validate it. And now, looking back, I shouldn't have done those things. And I'm glad I've learned from that. And I'm glad that I've stopped enabling people who have had rougher pasts, because you're not a product of your past, you're a product of what you choose to be and who you want to be moving forward. Another topic that I would like to lead into is, unfortunately, his obsessive fixation on my family has not ceased. It has been almost 8 years. January of 2021 will be 8 years since the day he tried to take my life, and we are still battling with harassment, unjustified lawsuit attempts, and other stalking behaviors. After my attack, I thought I could just move forward and never look back, and unfortunately, he has not allowed for that to happen. Often, I am dealing with life-threatening behavior, as far as him threatening my infant son. It turns into having to reach out to law enforcement to press charges, then in which he requests a jury trial, and I am yet again left to face him face to face. I believe he gets satisfaction out of knowing he gets a piece of me still. Fortunately, I'm in a much better headspace than I was 8 years ago, and I no longer allow him to manipulate me or allow him to victimize me. I'm a survivor, and I face him head on. I no longer feel guilt or the intense desire to try and figure out what I could have done differently to prevent that tragic day from happening. Although I have made strides in the victim traits I used to behold, it was never my fault. He made those choices, and he continues to make abusive and destructive choices. Although he has not and likely will never change, I am able to change my reaction to him. He's no longer allowed to have power over me like he did before. He is disarmed in his attempts at victimizing me because I refuse to be a victim. 1 out of every 4 women and 1 of every 7 men will experience severe physical violence by an intimate partner. Nearly 50% of women and men will experience psychological aggression by an intimate partner. Nearly 20 people per minute are abused by an intimate partner. Nearly 40% of homicides committed against females are domestic violence related. I could continue with the grueling amounts of statistics surrounding interpersonal violence, but I'll leave it at don't become another statistic. I want to close with a 7-year memoir that I wrote in regards to the impacts this event has had on my life. It's made me stronger, it's made me better. I've experienced a lot of self-growth, and so I will close with a memoir that I wrote for my 7-year anniversary, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So 7 years. 7 years of fear, 7 years of pain, 7 years of navigating a realm of emotions, and 7 years of change. But most importantly, 7 years of growth. Does it get easier? Well, this is not a simple answer. Dealing with the trauma does and always will continue to get easier. So please have hope. But it is a strange thing to me that every day something can get a little easier but never entirely diminishes. It lingers like a bad disease. Every day you fight, and every day you're one battle closer to burying the demon of your trauma forever in hopes to win that war. What doesn't get easier is the hypersensitivity to a normal environment. It's mesmerizing what color each individual in the parking lot is wearing, what color their hair is, and even what vehicle you witness them get in or out of. There are days where my journey from my front door to my car is what sends me into a raging panic. It is the lack of trust for human race that was ripped from my fingertips that gets me. These are the moments of the bearers of my trauma. They remind me I will never be the woman I was before my abuse. However, most days you begin to stop replaying that moment that broke you. All victims have one. What I ask is do not forget that moment. This is what will save you. It teaches you your worth, that you forged through the valleys of hell, and most importantly, it is your ever-standing reminder that you're a survivor, not a victim. What I will say, and I would never let my abuser be aware of, his abuse made me stronger. It made me powerful, and although I will never be the same woman I was the day before the moment that broke me, I'll never be a victim again. I will not allow myself to fall into a routine of behaviors I do not deserve, and nor will I allow irrelevant people to change the way that I think, feel, or live my life. For I'm a survivor, and I persevered through the hardest moments of my life, and I came out stronger, smarter, and better than I was the day before my breaking moment. Most days I worry. I worry for his next victim. And every time one gets away from his grip, I feel an overwhelming sense of happiness for that person. A stranger who I've never met, I have prayed for. I have prayed that they see him for what he is and get as far away from his grasp as possible. I pray that the young women that he preys on can see him for what he truly is. I cannot save the world, but if these words give at least one victim the strength to become a survivor they are meant to be, or if it prevents some beautiful soul from ever becoming a victim, then everything that I endured is not without reason. My name is Kate Riley, and I'm a survivor, not a victim. Thank you.